In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Milbartness, Lizzie Haynes, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome, all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, where we watch movies and then talk about them. I am your host, Brian Fry, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Dustin Melbartis. How you doing, bud?
Good evening. Feeling good to be sitting down in the AC. I built a dam today. Got in the water, started stacking rocks and mortar, built a dam. Finally able to relax and just chat some movies.
Right on, man. We're also welcoming in for the first time our guest host, Colter Gidley. How you doing, bud?
Good. How are you, gentlemen?
Awesome.
Can't complain. So we've got a great movie for you guys today. This is an action classic, but let's do a little bit of warm up first. So today's movie has a lethal duo. If you want action, excitement, in a double feature, what two movies are you picking to amp you up? Dustin.
I will start with a Jet Li film, Kiss of the Dragon, which is about 22 years old, maybe 23 years old. Chinese policeman in France, uncovering some shady stuff, and kung fu ensues. It's a great one. And then I'll follow it up with The Matrix Reloaded. The Matrix, the first one, is a better movie, but if we're talking about like action and excitement, they really ramp it up in the second one. They're trying to resolve too much in the third one, so I think Reloaded is right where we get that action peak.
All right, I'm going to butcher this dude's name, but Kiss the Dragon's the one with Checky Caro, isn't it?
Yeah, Checky Cario.
I love that dude.
I love that dude too.
He's one of those, like, take my money actors, bad guy, good guy, whatever.
Yeah, and in fact, just 1 month ago, we did The Patriot with Checky Cario as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that dude rules.
If I die, at least I will die well dressed.
That's right.
He's great in that movie. He's excellent in that movie.
He's also great in Kiss of the Dragon, though he is more the boss. He's got two heavies as his henchmen, and then there's several other henchmen.
Well, he's usually, I think the first movie I ever saw him in, he was the bad guy in the first Bad Boys movie.
I need to revisit that then. I forgot.
So, yeah, I mean, like, he kind of got his start with me as a bad guy. It wasn't until later that I started seeing him as a good guy and stuff. But anyway, I digress. Colter, man, what's your action movie duo?
Two movies that like amps me up that are like my go-tos.
Yeah.
Well, definitely actually Lethal Weapon, the film that's under review tonight is actually definitely one of them. I like to go kind of old school. I went through a big, years ago, a Dirty Harry phase.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
I really do love the Dirty Harry flicks.
If you had to pick one, what would it be?
Of all of the Dirty Harry movies? Probably the first one is definitely the best. It's absolutely the most iconic, you know? I mean, you can't go wrong with the first. The other ones get a little choppy towards the end. The Deadpool is actually really great too, though. I like the storyline for the Deadpool because I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the one where it's all these dirty motorcycle cops and they're just kind of often.
I thought that was Magnum Force.
Oh, that could be.
The one with the Magnum Force is my favorite of the.
If you want to make it a quadruple feature or a quintuple feature, you can do that too.
All the Dirty Harry films.
Yeah. Well, it was really weird too because I bought a whole Blu-ray set and it's missing the final movie. It's missing I don't know why they couldn't sneak in the final Dirty Harry movie.
He did one where he's a detective in New Orleans, and man, it was like it's just that right kind of sinister, and I've always enjoyed that one too. Anyway, off topic once again.
It'll happen a lot if I'm here.
I kind of felt like I needed to blend it, and these are both movies that I go to quite a bit. One a little bit more than the other, but I went with Aliens and Predator.
Oh, Damn,
So
Predator should have been mine. That's so good. It should have been mine.
I was trying to
over.
schmooze it. Predator definitely has some of the best one-liners by future
yeah.
politicians.
Yep.
And Aliens is just
I ain't got time to bleed.
Bill Paxton.
Yeah.
I love it. Coulter, I'm curious, what is the last movie you saw? It does not have to be in theaters.
Well, I'll go with both. Last movie I just went and saw in theaters, actually really recent, like a couple weeks ago. I went and saw Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Survey says
it was pretty. It was. I had a good time. I like that character. I don't really care too much about the story. I mean, there wasn't a lot of places they could go with the final movie, so I wasn't too surprised. Sure. But I just like that character, and Harrison Ford plays him so well. Obviously, he's got him dialed in, has for since the beginning. So it was good. And then I know this movie has been under review, but you told me I probably shouldn't listen to the episode, so I didn't. But I recently rewatched Legend with Tom Cruise and Mia Sara and Tim Curry. So
yeah,
but I heard you guys kind of eviscerated that one, so I was like, I don't want to hear him bash one of my favorites. So I stayed away from it. But I was really tempted. I was tempted to listen to it because I was like, if I listen to this and they really bash it, I'm going to want to defend it, and then it'll take over the rest of the show. So I was like, no, I'll stay away. We'll save it. We'll table it.
Sometimes if you're listening to us bash it, then it can open up. You don't have to agree with whoever's bashing it.
No.
Oh, yeah, okay, so fine. All that being said, and I still love it, something like that.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to see flaws that you never noticed, I think, in a movie that you love.
I saw a really excellent meme earlier today. It says, some of my friends are discussing why Harrison Ford is still playing Indiana Jones, but honestly, having an 80-year-old professor not retire is the most accurate part of the franchise.
Facts.
Yeah.
So I loved that.
He likes that tenure.
Right? Dustin, movies.
Super Troopers. I came across the little swiping tiles on the TV the other day. Well, come on. How do I say no? And after I finished it, it gave me the little option for Super Troopers 2. I still refuse to watch it. As you know, I'm.
Oh, dude, watch it. It's got. It opens with one of the best. I'm pretty sure it's toward the opening, but it opens with one of the best lines. All right. Let's see. Last movie I watched was called The Trench. It was a World War I movie starring Daniel Craig and a very young Cillian Murphy. Or Cillian Murphy. I don't know.
I think it's Cillian.
I always say it wrong. It doesn't. Cillian Murphy. Anyway, it's dark. It's dark. It's one of those movies Russell would be like, of course, I watch that.
Yeah. Yeah, but World War One really
you don't get a happy World War I movie.
right. But I think I've never seen a World War I movie I didn't like.
All right, today, if you haven't guessed yet, we are doing 1987's Lethal Weapon. This movie was starring Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, and Gary Busey. Its budget was about $15 million, and it grossed about $65, so that's a win.
Yeah, big win.
Placed 9th in the box office. The movie placed ahead of it was Stakeout. The movie that placed behind it was The Witches of Eastwick. Number one movie that year was 3 Men and a Baby. IMDb gives it a 7.6. Critics meter at Rotten Tomatoes give it an 80, and an audience of 86. So this is pretty highly regarded. It got one Academy nod for Best Sound Mixing, which is just the creme brulee of Oscars. Yeah. You're definitely getting a platform to do a speech for sound mixing, and it spawned the franchise that includes 3 sequels and a TV series. So let's talk a little bit about Lethal Weapon. Dustin, have you seen this movie before?
Yeah, I think this is in the category of movies that find their way on TV. So I'd seen it a couple of times. Ever completely start to finish? Probably not. And definitely not as an adult. It's been since I was 16 or 17 that I'd watched it. And the most recent Lethal Weapon I had seen was Lethal Weapon 4. I think that's 98 that came out. And then I came to think of it that because I'd never searched it out, I actually haven't seen 2 and 3. So it's been a while since I revisited it. But yeah, this is something that as sort of genre defining, it is easy to recall back to Lethal Weapon.
So Dustin, let's go a little deeper on this with me. What were you expecting coming into it this time?
So I had to pay closer attention. I had to listen a little more. I don't think I had ever seen the title screen, whereas Eric Clapton is involved with the music. So I had to pay attention to certain things like that. As far as what this podcast has done for me in terms of paying attention to cinematography, whether it's lighting, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to have a critical eye on. And it's easy when you already kind of have this relationship. But the expectation was I kind of already know these guys.
Sure.
And to see the movie again and see how they are pushed together is, I've said this many times, it's harder to do friendship in movies than it is to do romance. And maybe it's just because this has such a pedigree to the series name, but it was really cool to see that again as an adult, and especially after joining the show.
And does it still hold up to you? Like, do you still have the same feelings about it, or does watching it end to end for the first time change anything?
I will say the thing that is hardest to deal with about being a host on this show is when the things you start to notice are things that you might consider detractors. If you hold a film in high regard already, to be able to see, I'm thinking about this for the wrong reason. As far as the movie holding up, there's a lot of stuff that's easy enough to transgress eras. I mean, what do we have? We've got drugs being shipped in the U.S. You know, that's boilerplate. So it's the special things that we get that, you know, the relationship between Riggs and Murtaugh, that's what matters. The whole premise, I believe I made the exact same criticism, we'll say, of Beverly Hills Cop, where it's like, okay, yeah, this is sort of a rinse repeat. Oh, drugs are coming into the States. But it's almost too easy. And I will say, because it happens all the time, you can kind of give it a pass. If you understand the bad guys are bad, that's kind of all you need to do. So that would be the only thing I would say maybe doesn't hold up, is that this has become, as far as a premise for what the bad guys are, maybe a little tired. But I'm reaching for that criticism. And all in all, the movie itself holds up great.
Right on. All right. So, Coulter, tell me a little bit about your relationship with Lethal Weapon.
I have quite the relationship with Lethal Weapon. I don't really remember when I saw it. I know I had to have been a kid. Probably, double digits, somewhere in there. And then kind of like didn't watch it for a long time. And then I got into my teenage years and like rediscovered it all over again, because I was a little bit more well-informed with movies and, matured a little bit, I guess, you could say. And so, just fell in love with it and the entire franchise. So I've lived with this movie a lot of years, so I really didn't have to watch it a whole lot. I still watched it, I think, at least 2 times this week just to prep for this podcast. But
a lot of worse ways to spend your time,
right? And didn't really need to, but still kind of wanted to, because it had been a minute since I'd seen it. I usually will revisit portions of that franchise at least once a year, whether I go right to 2 or I'm craving 3 or Lethal Weapon 4. It just depends on how long it's been since I've seen each one of them. But so I mean, I have a lot of love for this movie. I think it's kind of, for me, it's it's really the template for the buddy cop movie. And I mean, I love that, because the buddy cop movie, a lot of times they have moments of intensity and levity and stuff, but they're funny and just fun to watch. It's a popcorn movie.
This has got to fall under I was probably too young to see it uncensored or rent it, so I would say this was probably a TNT special for me back in the 90s. I'm not sure. I think it shocked me at one point that there was nudity in this movie, because I think when I finally got to watch it uncensored, I was like, oh.
Yep. Yeah. Right away.
You caught a lot. You were like, oh, this is what I've been missing out on all the time.
It kicked off right off the bat. I was like, oh. So I would say that's one thing that changed over time for this film.
And you're just kind of like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, I was like, wait a second. Those were not in this movie up until right now. I still don't know how they have the guts to put movies like Bad Boys on TNT because it's literally every third word and the dubbing is just so bad.
It's like, what's the point? Like I went through a phase where I almost wouldn't watch something if it was on TV because I knew the edits and like the fact that it's cutting to commercials and it just is not a way to digest a movie. But sometimes you didn't have a choice, especially as a kid.
Yeah. 9-year-old me didn't register. Streaming didn't even come into play until nearly 10, 15 years later. So it was one of those things where it's like. Now I completely agree with you. Cable television is garbage to me now. Like, just it's like getting Smarties or something. You're just like, that's going to sit in the bottom of the candy bag for a while. Yeah. So,
hey, the Retro Movie Roundtable is not all anti-Smarties.
You're telling me you're going to skip the Snickers for the Smarties?
Hey man, I like Smarties. I like Necco wafers. I like
Necco. Oh, that's what I should have said. Hey, no disrespect, Smarties. I should have said Necco.
Necco is objectively
one of the little strawberry things that somehow your grandmother has in the candy dish at her house. The ones that are wrapped like a strawberry.
I was guilty of liking the strawberry Necco in my youth.
So no, it didn't really change much until I watched the uncensored, and once I watched the full uncensored, I guess it changed a little bit for me, but not like not entirely. So, but yeah, I think it holds up. I've got something to go into when we talk about wardrobe and what later, but no, this is a strong, solid action movie. It adds a little bit of comedy to it. I do, if executed well and not. Throwing it in your face. I like a good action comedy as long as it's balanced appropriately. So I don't know. This is a good movie. But we're going to take a few minutes for an advertising break, and then I hope you've watched it because Dustin's going to ruin it for you. Plot summary coming up, folks.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason, and this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies, the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments, too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
And we're back. Now, just another warning, spoilers lie ahead. Dustin is going to ruin Lethal Weapon with a nice lengthy plot summary for you. Take it away, Dustin.
We open on a lingerie-clad bombshell leaping to her death, and the ensuing investigation introduces us to family man Roger Murtaugh, celebrating his 50th birthday. Cut to the beach where we see Martin Riggs wake up with a lit cigarette in his mouth, and he has a Champion's Coors banquet breakfast. Murtaugh quickly learns that an old friend, Mike Hunsaker, tried to reach him recently, and coincidentally, the same surname is attached to our recent jumper. Across town, Riggs makes a risky play to bust a drug dealer before contemplating swallowing a bullet. Chances would have it, though the department knows Riggs either has a death wish or is suicidal, that the two men are paired together to work the Hunsaker case. On their first day, a call comes across the radio. There's another jumper nearby, and Riggs talks the man down in a unique fashion, prompting Murtaugh to explode on his reckless behavior and nearly push him to just end it already, removing his life from the possible casualty risk of just being near Riggs. We learn just how true this is as they pay a visit to the pimp associated with the woman who jumped, resulting in Riggs saving Murtaugh's life, but also eliminating their chances of learning anything from him through accidental elimination. Murtaugh opens up a pathway toward trusting this potential psycho after bringing him home for his wife's atrocious cooking, before hitting the firing range the next day to witness Riggs' Special Forces training in action. Following the next lead, they identify Mercury switches and learn the identity of the man who just blew up their last lead's house, a tall, blonde man named Mr. Joshua, working for the General, leader of Shadow Company, formed during the Vietnam War but continuing to work together to make a lot of money importing heroin. Shadow Company begins to tie up loose ends, killing Mike Hunsaker and attempting to gun down Riggs. The two plan to get back at Shadow Company when Murtaugh's daughter, Rianne, gets abducted, leading to the three of them being captured and tortured before Riggs triggers a daring escape, leading to the General's demise, Rianne's safety, and a brutal hand-to-hand showdown with Mr. Joshua. With the bad guys dispatched, Riggs pays tribute to his recently passed wife before joining the Murtaugh family for the worst turkey dinner on the planet.
Excellent. So, Coulter, you brought this movie up as your choice for the podcast. So, how do you feel about this as a standing plot for your intro to buddy cop movies?
It's good. Like we kind of talked about earlier with the drugs coming into America. It's pretty standard boilerplate stuff, but it works. What's more essential in a buddy cop movie is the relationship. And it's almost harder. I was listening to you say that it's almost harder to write a good friendship than it is like a relationship in a film. So they, and they start off, really, and I think the way they introduce those two characters, Murtaugh and Riggs, is really well. They're on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. Where they're at in their lives. You got the family man who's just turning 50, and then you got the other guy who's, I think Riggs is supposed to be like 38 or somewhere in there, like late 30s. And you can tell he's kind of down and out. He's just not having really a good time in life. And so it's that stark contrast. So it's like the perfect introduction, I think, to those characters and kind of the story. And then you have because it feel the hooker throwing herself off of the building, you're like, oh, whoa, what's this all about? Where's this going? Kind of type thing. And then you get these characters, the cops, the people that you're going to be following throughout the whole film. Yeah, but I really love the introduction, and the closest thing though is kind of in my notes that you get with Riggs that there's a soft heart somewhere in there, despite that he clearly kind of doesn't care about himself too much. He's got a dog in his little butt hut trailer that he's
sure.
So
good old Sam.
Which is always a good sign, that's always like, oh, they're a dog lover, they must be okay,
Yeah, that he is really loose cannon doesn't really put it that way. He's kind of loose everywhere with what's inside of his head.
Yeah,
and we're shown that early in this movie.
Yep.
And there's a lot of effort put into it, and it actually does last throughout the movie as the drama is intensifying and the stakes are being raised. You're still getting little parts of whether it's comedy, whether it's like a mistimed joke, or it's something that is Mel Gibson just acting his buns off. Mm-hmm. There are some times where his demeanor, they don't really get closer to one another in personalities. They stay separate. Now, the rest of the movies will show them working together more, and the end of the movie shows, them taking the exact same move, but they really, I guess, our director here keeps them separate and has them play into those roles much more than we have them sharing a beer at the local, cop tavern. Mm-hmm. Their share a beer scene is really in the sort of Murtaugh part of the story, which is family man, I've got this boat, and he doesn't know much about the boat. So it was well crafted the way these two guys are together. It's not just we tell you that they're an odd couple. They really show us.
Yeah, absolutely. They 100% do. And there's that thing of Riggs really pushes Murtaugh's buttons, makes him almost makes him unhinged, in his own personality. He's pretty calm, cool, collected a little bit, but and it's a different space when they're on the job and they're working out in the field, doing their police work. But when he gets that guy down from the building, right, and he just screams "Get in there now!" He's going almost father figure on him.
Danny Glover rips that door off the hinges.
Oh,
nearly.
almost. Yeah, it nearly comes off. And he like pushes that lady or that guy in the doorway, like, get out of my way. And
Yeah.
just practically almost shoves Riggs into the building.
I think sometimes with the buddy cop dynamic, or if it's an existing friendship, there can be a conversation of like, hey, let's get back behind cover and talk. And what we get here is a screaming, shouting match where like our lives are in danger. And I got to say, Danny Glover's emotional range there is also incredible. He is so animated and powerful with how he feels about, yeah, you're going to get me killed. And, you know, it is, I think that happens a lot in any law enforcement or cops, buddy cop style movie where one person's actions get the other person killed. I don't know if people have been taking the lesson from Lethal Weapon is that one of the guys should freak out at the other one. And it's so good to see that early, 87.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because he's basically, he's calling him out like that. It was like almost outside unconventional. Like it was a step further that he like cuffs himself to the guy. And granted, they had, you know, something, a safety net, literally, basically. But he, you know, he's like, you wanted him down. I got him down. What do you want from me? And then like, and just the way it ends though, too. It's like after Riggs has gotten it all out, he's done his shouting, all that stuff. And then just looks at him and his jaw kind of clicks, almost like he's like, almost like druggy style. But he's like, I'm hungry. I'm going to get something to eat. And then just exits the building.
I think the only beef I have, and it's not even really a beef with this plot, is I feel like you can almost chart a timeline of using ex-military bringing in drugs and or money for action movie.
Yeah. Like
while you guys were talking, I was just taking like mental notes on like, you know, John Travolta in Basic. I just recently, I've been watching Bosch on Prime Video. Bosch season 2 or 3 is, you know, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam in this case, like it's kind of a belabored point. We were Dustin and I were talking about Jack Reacher before we started the episode. The second Jack Reacher movie. Like I didn't really think about it this way until we brought it up and started talking about it. But man, the ex-soldiers importing drugs and or money is a very, very well used plot point. I'm not saying you need to change it. And this one happened so long ago that it's, you know, it's hard to pin it on this being at fault in any way.
Right.
But I will say that I do notice that this is a very well-worn plot trope.
That's a great way of putting it. It's well worn, and this movie's rated R, and so if you're going to push to R, then I think you can probably push to a crime or a series of crime or a syndicate, whatever it is, that's doing a little more than drugs. And the fact is, drugs are so rampant, it's just too easy. I might make the point that the General and Shadow Company are scarier in name than I think in what we see.
Oh, really? Not Mr. Joshua?
I love Mr. Joshua, right? But their influence and their power is something that it left a little bit to be desired. Aside from all you kind of really need to know is that they are the bad guy. And with their, if we're going to go into any illicit activity, there might be a level of squeamishness for, if we're going to make this movie, do we really go with something truly awful like child trafficking or something? But yeah, it's a bit too tried and true.
You really get into that Gary Busey top teeth action though with that one scene, you know.
I love calling him Scary Busey because he looks particularly scary and haggard these days.
So here's the thing, man. I really like Gary Busey. Gary Busey. I put him in the category with like actors like Tom Sizemore, where you're like, man, I know you're a hot mess, but I enjoy watching your hot mess on film.
Yeah.
So you know I respect it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the cast a little bit. I think that's a good segue into. So we talked about Gary Busey a little bit. how do you feel that Mel and Danny really gelled together? Like, do you think, like, I almost felt, I'm going to start on this one just since I kind of had the kickoff for it. I almost felt like the producers and directors picked the two of them, purposefully had them never meet, and then had them act these parts in the film, because it really does start like, I don't know you, you don't know me, I don't like you, you don't like me, and then literally had them gel in a very organic way. I'm sure that's not how it happened, but that's how it felt to me watching it.
When you look at the surrounding the film, you do hear, especially from Danny Glover, that him and Mel became really good friends for the next several years. And it is believable. You want to give them credit for acting, but if they do strike up a real friendship, then that's all the better. It's the same as if you can see real chemistry. Chemistry among friendship is good too. The pace to which they go from... See, I don't know. I think we are supposed to assume that I don't like you, you don't like me. We are given a good reason, which is the guy's dangerous and has a death wish. It's not just like, oh, he's a bad boy, or he plays by his own rules, right? Speaking of tropes, but this guy, we are given an extremely visceral, near suicide scene. So we see that he means it. And that is maybe the greatest gift that we can be given to the whole franchise, is that he's seen as a potential psycho, that they're saying he might, he's actually trying to push for some type of leave/pension. But as far as both Mel and Danny, I don't know if I can say for sure that Mel's character is a particular style of character, being like switching between these strange tics of his are, I think I've seen him do it a lot. We saw it in Conspiracy Theory. We saw it in The Patriot. I think that he has that ability. And then Danny Glover, who I think beyond the Lethal Weapon movies has a lot of muted performances. The idea that Mel's character can drive him to the antics and can drive him to being as animated as he is, it seems very believable that chemistry is real.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like really my favorite part of the whole thing. I mean, I can't remember. I think it's in Lethal Weapon 3 or something. Like Riggs goes, "We're back. I'm bad. You're black. I'm white." Or he does this whole thing of like,
"You're black. I'm mad."
Yeah, I'm mad, and this whole thing. But yeah, so touching on that suicide scene or near suicide attempt, well, you barely call it an attempt, I guess, but
yeah, like the intention is clearly there.
The intention, yeah, we'll call it. So that was actually a blank, and which is kind of a big deal for him to put a blank still and have that pistol like right in his mouth and right up against his forehead and under his chin, wherever he puts it. He puts it in a couple different spots on his head. There's still potential, like there have been fatal times where that's been fatal. Like a blank can still be fatal to an actor or to a person.
I thought it was a hollow. Oh, you're saying that it was a blank that they used, but he's
yeah.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah. I'm sorry. I was like, it's a hollow point. I thought.
Yeah, no, yeah, because he's like, oh yeah, it's a hollow point. Get the job done. So
right.
Yeah, he does that whole thing. But yeah, so he uses. I mean, so like, and I think that was Mel Gibson's idea to do that because he wanted it to feel as real as humanly possible.
Boy, it did.
To the audience, and it totally did, and it's like, and it is really depressing. But so anyway, we talked about because that's still part of like showing the dichotomy of the characters, where they're at in their lives. But yeah, the growth, I think it's got really good pacing as their relationship develops, not just working wise, because like when it's business time, they're all business. They go into straight up cop mode. Like we may not like each other, know each other that well, but I got your back and I know you got my back. But then as the case develops and they're hot on the trail and they start to not just the natural trust of both being boys in blue, but like actually getting to know each other. Like that's why that dinner scene and stuff is so like, and that's a trope too. Like we're talking about tropes, and like just to circle back around for a little bit, if I could, to talking about like the whole drug running, ex-military. I mean, but truly, I mean, even today, a lot of police officers are ex-military. They do. I mean, that's kind of the next best thing. But then also, it's kind of a mild trope I've seen in different movies and television shows like Justified. There's an episode where they're talking about how guys get out of the service and they go end up doing wet work. They end up being contract killers and stuff like that. So it's not too far-fetched from reality that, you know, but what's interesting too, though, is every character in this movie is ex-military, from the general to Gary Busey's character, Mr. Joshua. Both Mel Gibson's, you know, Riggs and Murtaugh were both in Vietnam. They were just on different ends, you know, basically. So it's, and I've never really thought about it until I did this viewing where
Neither had I.
They never really bonded over that they'd both been in the military. They talk about it, but they don't view each other as like, oh, we're not just brothers in blue, we're brothers in arms, you know, type thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
It's always been my view across various military to law enforcement movies that, especially Vietnam, no one ever talks about Vietnam.
No.
Like, Vietnam vets are just like, oh, are you there? Okay.
Unless they want to, I guess. Unless
right,
they want to, you know, kind of type thing. I suppose, yeah. I mean, some love to talk about it, I think, but a lot of them don't. I think Riggs totally still has, and I don't think Riggs is supposed to be necessarily portrayed as alcoholic. Like, he definitely drinks, but like that doesn't seem to be his issue. His issue is his dead wife, more so than anything. But he still has a, you know, obviously a modicum of, because I mean, you know, depression does lead to alcoholism and all that stuff. So
he cool guy drinks. He's the guy that wakes up in the morning and instead of having Cocoa Puffs, he has a Coors Banquet. Like that. He doesn't pour himself out a bowl of Cheerios and fill the bowl up with vodka. So it's not alcoholism drinking. It's, I'm a cool guy that wakes up naked in his Winnebago on the beach in California. I've got a cool dog that comes when I whistle for him, and I open up a beer and have breakfast. Like, it's a different amount of product placement. Like, that might as well be a Pepsi in my mind.
I think at one point I couldn't tell. It was like not quite a pint glass, but I couldn't tell like later. I think it was it might have been during the suicide scene.
Right before he puts the gun in his mouth. I know what you're talking about. He's got a glass full of a brown liquid.
Yeah, it almost looks like he's swilling whiskey because it didn't have any like foam or carbonation, what you could tell anyway. But
he strikes me as a guy that would drink a flat beer, though.
Yeah, I would agree.
Maybe he's a little cigarette ash still in it.
Yeah, because he's always drinking Coors out of the can. So I don't think he's a guy who's like, well, I'm going to get a can, I'm going to get a pint glass, I'm going to do this whole thing. So I bet that was whiskey, but I think a whiskey is like, he probably does that when he's really feeling low and really wants to get tuned.
Yeah,
well, speaking of beers, it is great that we have an opportunity again. It's at Murtaugh's place. They're in the boat, and his wife is just taking the trash out, and they're up there. You know how frequently you end up, if you're with a work peer outside of work, just how frequently you're going to talk about work, and they are. But just the sharing of a beer, because inside they're having, when they're having dinner, it's not like they've got other, it's not like they're cracking any open in there. This is like a special thing. It's like, hey, come out to the garage, we'll have a couple.
Yeah.
It is a step in the learning to trust you, learning to tolerate you. I guess for Murtaugh, it's learning to tolerate you. I think that's a One Direction thing. I don't believe that we've got Riggs trying to tolerate Murtaugh. Riggs is the one that's kind of sees everybody against him. And it's Murtaugh with his family life and his,
because everybody thinks he's
career.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's like
resting on his shoulders.
I think it's also like a status quo thing. I think usually when you're the like, let's say, I'll use it as an introvert extrovert, commentary where, the introvert's like, I wish this guy would shut up. And then the extrovert's like, you need to talk more. So I don't think it's I think Glover definitely has his reservations about, you know, the mental stability of his partner, but Mel Gibson's more like, you just need to lighten up a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it's not there's not a life threatening piece. It's not even like in Bad Boys where you have Will Smith and Martin Lawrence and Will Smith's always on Martin Lawrence. Like you need to get guns. You know, that's how you drive. That's how you shoot. Like he always has this, like, you need to get a little bit more loose with your activity and stuff like that. So, I think all of these cop partner duos, they all have like a, uptight versus loose cannon, that sort of dichotomy. And I think Mel Gibson's pretty understanding of Murtaugh's situation. He's just like, you just need to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and the beer scene, Dustin was kind of saying they were kind of like they're sort of still tolerating each other. I think that's where you start to see the seeds planted of they're warming up to each other. It's still very mild, but they're almost re-breaking bread. Like, yeah, he had him over for dinner, but offering him a beer and showing him the boat is kind of like a new way of breaking bread and like starting to sort of iron things out a little more, because then he leaves and he says to him, he's like, you don't trust me, do you? Or Riggs says to Murtaugh, you don't trust me, do you? And Murtaugh says, I tell you what, you get through tomorrow without getting me killed or killing anybody else, I'll start to trust you.
Sure.
Simpson, like, chill out, lighten up a little bit.
There's a moment on this watch, because, you once you know a movie, you can sometimes stop paying attention. But, the part of Riggs for being someone that risky with his kind of drug bust earlier.
Yeah, and, I love that scene actually, though.
That's great.
Yeah,
so
and risky with the handcuffed myself to the jumper, and we're both going to jump. We do get you saved my life. Now they lose out on the ability to question him, and they could that could have gone better, we'll say, but it happens in several movies like this, but I think this is the first watch through where I really was trying to pay attention to the swing, pay attention to how the character pivots towards being ready to accept his new partner. And I tell you, saving someone's life is the biggest step you can take.
Yeah, Murtaugh gets a little more vulnerable, I think, with Riggs in that regard. Definitely more trust. Like, okay, despite this guy, I think this guy's kind of unhinged. He's crazy. Because there's that whole scene when he chews him out after the jumper scene. And it was kind of nuts that, like, Murtaugh, like, straight up takes out his gun and hands it to him. He's like, here, go ahead. Do it, And it's like, you're kind of like, whoa.
Crazy is the right word.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that is really solidifying the point that you had made earlier, which is that he really drives him up a wall, and
Riggs drives Murtaugh up a wall. Yeah.
To go so far as to say, "Here, take it, do it now,
get out of my hair."
Exactly. Yeah.
I thought this was a fairly thin movie when it comes to cast discussion. Like, you've got Murtaugh's family playing that role. We briefly touched on Gary Busey, and I have a feeling that, at least for me, he's going to come up again in superlatives.
I actually thought the family was really well cast for Murtaugh, and the dialogue between Murtaugh and his wife, Trish, was super good. Like that whole scene when they're on the boat, and she's like, "Thanks for taking out the trash, Martin," or Sarge, and he's like, "Honey, I'm entertaining our guests." Their dialogue was really good. Like the whole banter, like even in the kitchen, he's like, "What's for dinner?" And he throws down the oven, and he's like, "How about a brown roast substance?" And all this, this whole thing. Like, and it's classic stuff that, like, you go over to a buddy's house that's married, or even my parents have banter that's similar to that. They're digging at each other. They're kind of just, they're having fun. But it's that playful kind of teasing banter that kind of made that family feel lived in to me.
Sure.
Yeah, and absolutely agree with you. I have to say that the moment that Murtaugh gets home his focus. You can tell that the character, Glover's portrayal, but also his character is really scanning the house for like being a father, and you see remnants of it. You know, there's a sort of rubbing / etching style picture of him on the wall right by the front door.
Yep.
And there's the kitchen seems very much like a family's kitchen. You know, his wife at the beginning of the movie drops an egg on the floor right after he makes a bad cooking joke.
Yep.
And she says, "Look out for the egg." And he goes, "Oh,
didn't know I was supposed to watch out for egg."
Silly me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing. It's not a house, it's a home. They dressed that set correctly.
Good point.
Everything. And like the kids, the interaction with the kids, like they're all at the dinner table and Riggs is really getting to peer into his home life. And they're almost acting as if Riggs isn't there. Like the only one that really is, I mean, it's palpable,
Rianne.
enamored with Riggs is Rianne. She's just staring, you know, she's a teenage girl and like he's this, you know,
Hey, you must be
hotshot
boys.
new cop. Yeah, exactly. So it's that was kind of funny and cute and Riggs is kind of like he's not, you know, he's just kind of like he's noticing it, but he's not obviously he's not going to feed into it, but he's just kind of like I feel like you see on his face, he's like, what the hell is she looking at? What's her deal? You know? Yeah.
You know, I had mentioned Super Troopers. In Super Troopers, those guys are funny and they are funny to one another.
Yes.
Characters where their quality is they're funny is hard to write.
Yep.
Riggs says things that are humorous because he's a little off the wall, but it must be that after this movie, once we've got the dynamic, that then you can introduce comedy as, oh, this is part of Riggs's wit, not just part of circumstantial comedic situations.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He likes to bring levity to intense situations, actually, I think. Like,
well, and look, I mean, that's a defense mechanism. Like I typically like I use humor in inappropriate situations all the time because that's
all the time.
That's what I do.
Yep.
So 100%. Let's talk a little bit now about the film creation. We've got a producer here in Joel Silver, he produces a litany of pop culture action movies. And then we have a director here who also does several key name action movies. How are we feeling about the direction of this movie and those backing it?
I'll start with something that Coulter had mentioned earlier, which is I could not come up with a single instance where I thought the pace was wrong. The pace, I think, is perfect. And that's really wonderful. Any tinkering you do with it is unneeded. It might be preferential, but unneeded. Aside from that, I think that with a small cast, right? We've got a family, but we don't have any other interesting cops. There's a cop doctor, but then there's also the kind of the chief that it kind of ignores that Riggs is suicidal. We have a task for our director, which is focus on these two for the whole movie. And the brief times that we are focused on something that is not our two principals, that opening jumper scene is 3.5 minutes. Now, some of it is credits, but 3.5 minutes, and that's he gets to show off a little bit of style there with the kind of rotating zoom in shot on her naked torso. You know, looking at a movie like this is really kind of reinforces to you how far we've come in lingerie in the last 40 years. And then you get the jumping off of the balcony scene. You know, I used to equate that with Forrest Gump. And I realized, like, wow, this one's better because it's a vignette. And like this vignette it does set off a domino for the rest, but by itself is a great little vignette. There's a couple others where you have your introduction for the general and Mr. Joshua with the very scared guy, Juarez or Montez.
The drug dealer that they're pulling in.
Great job of saying, you aren't tough.
Yeah.
We need to tell you that you won't matter to this movie. So you are in here and you need to be scared of this situation. And because I don't think that guy came into this role saying, like, I'm going to play off being a crime guy who's intimidated. That had to come from our director. some of the things I might not say, Brian, you actually did it on video for us listeners. He actually held a lighter up to his arm.
Yeah.
Hey, that's cool. Could there have been 100 other ways to show how tough Mr. Joshua is? I think so. But this is one that will stick with you. That's a success. So I think these are a lot of choices that for the monumental task of making a movie that focuses on just two people most of the time. And then when you're not on them, is it getting us enough info, or is it getting us something that's compelling to keep the story going? It's a win all around.
Yeah, I mean the lighter scene. So what's been fun about getting ready, prepping to do this podcast was thinking. I mean, I love this movie, I adore it, and thinking more critically about this movie. And I always liked that scene, but I do agree. I was like, I mean, loyalty is a sense of like, look at my cronies, like this is my right hand man. Look at how loyal he is. So you should be scared, because when I ask him to jump, he's going to say how high or ask how high. So I think that was kind of the point of that. But yeah, I mean, I did kind of think about that scene, which I still love that scene, but I kind of thought of it like, I don't know, they could have done, like maybe like that drug dealer guy that they were doing that to comes in, he's got a hench or something. They just, kill him, or, I don't know, cut off his arm or something. I don't know. But like but they wanted to just kind of, they were just kind of mildly trying to establish to this guy, like, hey, we're all business. We're not messing around here. You had better not back out. Nobody backs out, kind of type thing. Like, if you're going to do business with us, some stuff is funny and not meant to be funny. When the general goes, "You has to do business, yes?" He he's screaming at him. The way he says that, I don't know. He's kind of cracks me up a little bit.
Well, and the rest of that organization, whatever it is not really shown to us. Its scope is described, but even when he shows up to where that club is, which, first of all, I got to say, one of the detractors, the music playing, even with Eric Clapton coordinating, the music playing by the live bands in that club is bad throughout. That's too bad. But the idea that he arrives at the club and he's not met by another bouncer or even a sexy, evil receptionist, he's met by Mr. Joshua. So Mr. Joshua's pulling double duty as the secretary and as the heavy. That is potentially a mistake here, is that give some weight to the size of the organization. If I think back to, same year, Beverly Hills Cop, we've got, no, not same year, but if we think back to Beverly Hills Cop, they're heavy. Their bad guy is like up in a high rise, and there's clearly power, and there's dozens and dozens of security guards. I think that it might just have been a decision where it's like, hey, the bad guys you're focusing on are like the power and the muscle, and that's kind of all you need to see. And that, not bad, but maybe could have been better.
They seem to ride a little deeper towards the end, like in that desert scene. I don't know, but it still feels like kind of a skeleton crew as far as a bad guy outfit goes.
Just to play devil's advocate on this for a minute, I think that it actually gives credence to why they're so sewn up tight that they don't use the receptionist, that they don't have the sexy, extra person. I think the less people you have in on it, the less likely you are to spring leaks. And the fact that he only uses these trusted mercenaries that were already under his command in the real world speaks to the cluster of the organization. I think the distraction of the band in the background probably feeds the fact that even if this guy was wearing some sort of clever wire, his compatriots wouldn't be able to necessarily understand what's being talked about. And then in terms of Mr. Joshua, how much more hardcore can you be? You can direct force toward an associate of the other guy to show how badass you are. But how much more BA is it to say, hey, I can hurt one of my guys and I'm still that much better than you. So I feel like the machismo of that situation, and it was such a simple thing. It's a less is more. I'm going to burn this dude in front of you. You're going to smell his flesh searing with a Bic lighter. Imagine what I could do with more tools.
Yeah. Yeah. And
do we see his tattoo in that arm burning scene?
I don't
know.
So.
I don't think so.
Would have been better if we did, when you consider the foreshadowing.
Oh, yeah, with the kids and stuff.
There's no question that it's cool.
Like, but they're his mercs. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they're all mercs.
Yeah.
Even the boss's mercs. It's not like he hired them as a team to back him up. Like, they all came over as a top-down mercenary organization that also deals drugs. I think that's an important distinction, because anytime you hire people as not one of them, then you leave yourself open to they're going to be more loyal to themselves than they ever will be to me or my dollar. Whereas the idea that, yes, they are highly trained mercs, and I was their commander, so it's a top-down, we're all one and the same thing, I feel like makes it a more imposing adversary.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it until now. With the general exploding in the overturned sedan, and then we have Mr. Joshua essentially escaping to where? I don't think we know. I think the organization must be larger than just who we saw, based on the scope of the power described.
Probably.
Or is he just kind of getting out of Dodge? I don't think he's finding another person like to report to.
I think he's getting out of Dodge, but I mean, they've got pipelines and everything. I mean, there's interweavings, but I think they are it. They're their own little microcosm of an organization, but they're obviously moneyed up and they're kind of manned up enough, but they also, because they're mercs and they're ex-military, they have really special skill sets that allow them to be menacing, and they can muscle their way into deals and getting people on their side.
But speaking of the scene in the desert, with the supposed advantage, I feel like I would have loved to see maybe just slightly different, even if it was another 30 seconds to a minute of Riggs being able to pick off like the high priority dangers.
100%. I was thinking that this time around too.
I want to see Murtaugh open the door to his car and fire from behind cover more than I want to see him hold a grenade. And I like this movie a lot, but this is when you rewatch for the show, you start to think a little more critically. And so like I don't hate the scene, but I do think like these guys are all special forces or ex-special forces, and at a level to where Shadow Company keeps them around. And if Mr. Joshua was burnable, they're all probably burnable.
Right.
The element of surprise was enough. I wish I could have seen more of it. Or like, once again, the scope of this, everybody, both the good guys and the bad guys, we've got situations where we're dealing with a small amount of actors. Coulter, you brought it up. The biggest show of force is in the desert. They all get taken down pretty quick. And then you've got the helicopter chasing down the car, which can only kind of, you have to make that chase work. And they do, with her getting out, leading us to our culminating scenes with them all kind of captured. Which, once again, like, you got to think, great job with either, whether you want to call it our director or our writers, who put it in a situation that a lot of times when you're watching a movie or where you're watching a TV show and everyone's captured, like, hey, there's not like a third person waiting outside to save the day. There's not the hacker in the truck. There's not the grease man in the ducts. It's just those two.
Yeah.
And so tech guy in the truck.
The tech guy in the truck. We don't have him, right? We don't have somebody cutting the lights out. What we have is hinting at Riggs being ultimo badass, and then we get to see it. Withstanding Endo's torture and feigning that he's done before summoning the energy to take him out.
Oh, it shows him truly unhinged and like in his most badass kind of moment, really.
And that is, you have to say, like, it's a credit to how the movie was put together, because getting to a point where your principles are all caught with 35 minutes left, a lesser director might have painted himself into a corner.
Sure.
Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And here we had a wonderful way that they escaped.
I do like a lot of the helicopter shot, like that desert scene is kind of like, because I was really trying to think and it was kind of hard to pick, but that is like, aside from kind of the opening of the movie, over the head, you're seeing the car driving. And I also love, for whatever reason, it's kind of funny, like, because I think they busted up their cruiser, or like his car, I think Murtaugh's car that they travel around in before that, and they're taking the old station wagon out to the desert to go fetch his daughter. It's this raggedy, like family car. That was kind of funny.
It also ends up being a common thread of the movies of Riggs messing up Murtaugh's car. How are we feeling about the set designs, the location?
It takes place in Los Angeles. It takes place during Christmas, which I like that the biggest mention they make of Christmas is you see the Christmas tree in the living room at Murtaugh's house. There's little nods to the fact that it takes place during December.
There's somebody in the crowd looking up at the jumper wearing a Santa Claus outfit.
Yeah. And then in the precinct, there's that lady cop goes, all right, 1, 2, 3, and then one guy starts and she hits him with the nightstick.
Yeah.
There's
it's
that.
So bad.
But it's Los Angeles, so it's really bright and sunny. And then as the movie, goes forward, more scenes take place at night and stuff. So it's kind of gives that contrast of oh man, stuff's about to kick off and pop off, plot wise and escalate basically.
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier. I had something I wanted to say about wardrobe and makeup. It actually has nothing to do with wardrobe or makeup. It's about props. This is the decade of the MP5 and Beretta.
Yep.
So the 1980s, it's these are the two guns that are most highly featured in all cop military-esque film. We have not yet progressed to the Fugitive and U.S. Marshals and the introduction of the Glock. Yep. So, it's definitely one of those things where, you got your Die Hard, you got your Lethal Weapon, and you'll see the usual suspect product placement of certain firearms.
Well, and speaking of the Beretta, that one that Riggs uses actually gets used by in Die Hard. That's the one that John McClane uses, and then it finally got retired. Are you saying the
actual prop was?
The prop. The prop.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was the same prop.
Use the same prop.
That
so
rules.
I thought that was kind of cool. And obviously, isn't it meant to be Riggs's service pistol that he uses? Because it's got that little, it's got a medallion emblem on the handle of the gun.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of exposed. It's kind of exposed at one point at different intervals in his hand. Also, really love just so kind of circling back just for a little bit, the dichotomy and contrast of Riggs and Murtaugh. Murtaugh obviously very buttoned down, wears a suit. I love that Riggs wears the jeans and cowboy boots and a flannel shirt and stuff, and sometimes wears a ball cap. Doesn't use a holster. Always sticks it in the front or the back of his pants, and Murtaugh's very conventional and has the holster and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that's probably because he's used to being narco undercover? He's never had to be the detective notifying next of kin and whatnot, where they want you looking to be the face of the department. He's coming off of long-term undercover.
Narcotics, yeah. Riggs, yeah. I would say so, yeah. It probably speaks to how he's used to operating within that section of the police force. So, yeah, I mean, think of it in that tree scene, which we kind of briefly touched on. That's such a great scene of he's like, how much for all of it, and that whole thing. That's a cool, funny action scene. You idiot. Yeah, he's
Absolutely.
he goes... Yeah, it's super good. So yeah, and just I don't know, but even narco cops, I think. I don't know a ton about them, but I'm sure I'm sure it depends on what they're doing.
I also like to think that we know that that Riggs is kind of he sleeps in the buff and just puts on whatever.
Yeah,
because that's what makes him comfortable. This film series, but this movie does a great job of making you think. At least it made me think that Murtaugh is comfortable wearing the suit, tie, cardigan, and the tie all the way up.
Oh yeah.
Whereas
even wears a sweater in Los Angeles over his shirt. I feel like I've noticed it before, but I really kind of noticed it again. Watching, I was like, good God. I know it's December in California, but good God, man.
Yeah.
And it's tweed probably that he's wearing, his coat, his jacket, his suit jacket.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that have to wear a suit, but I think they've written it to where Murtaugh is comfortable in an uncomfortable suit. Like
Yeah.
that, he is the part of the odd couple. Like,
Could be a
I
pride.
like
Could be a
being
pride thing too, like or not pride so much as integrity. He wants to feel more integral in his role as a police officer.
Good point.
I want to just circle back around to what I was saying about the narco piece. In everything I've ever watched where it's, homicide, which is what he's working here, they go to a scene, they detect things, they go and pursue, they lean on people. Everything is very, I am a cop for the most part.
Yeah.
I think in the drug world, it's the opposite. Like everything you can do to not look and act and smell like a cop, you've got to do. So
I blend in.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning pretty heavily on Riggs is a product of his environment. Now, I think they use that in some of the ageism that happens in this movie. They lean into it a little heavier just to give that the differences between the aged Danny Glover and the young hotshot Mel Gibson. So they probably utilize that a lot. But yeah, in most of the things that I watch, and I watch a fair amount of detective stuff, I think it's more about what your job entails and who's seeing you and what you're doing than it is about, him being unwilling to wear a suit or anything like that, or what makes it comfortable.
Yeah, it's an age thing because he's pushing 50, but truly, I think Mel Gibson was in his early to mid 30s, maybe. He's supposed to be 38.
Danny Glover was 41.
Danny Glover was 41, but he was supposed to be fit. I mean, he totally passed for 50, I guess, which I don't know if that's like good or bad, but like,
right. Yeah.
But I mean, I think it was how he totally carried himself and like the language that he uses and how he speaks and stuff. And even from the gun he uses, which I'll kind of touch on that when we get to the superlatives and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's just that was another cool element of like Odd Couple type stuff.
Sure. Did either of you want to add anything to what we've already discussed in terms of the soundtrack and score?
Love the bluesy saxophone type stuff, all the, and they kept that as a constant kind of theme with the music throughout all the movies, which I loved.
It's a constant thing. I know it's become, it has pervaded past just the movies. Like it's a well-known thing.
Yeah.
And I do think of, if any of you TV watchers have seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, they make a fan-made Lethal Weapon 5 movie where the main characters in that show play Riggs and Murtaugh, and that recognizable saxophone. I won't think of that with any other. Like it's totally a Lethal Weapon thing.
Yeah.
Because I've recognized it so much, because I've attributed to it so much. In this one, there are times when I feel like, oh, here it is again. Could there have been a better choice? Perhaps. But there is no other choice because this is Lethal Weapon. Lethal Weapon, you use a saxophone.
Well, they didn't lean into like the 80s tropes of like lots of synth and stuff, like Beverly Hills
Which
Cop.
is nice.
There's very little
which I
like
love
actual.
Synth.
Yeah.
I love all that. I love that stuff of the 80s. But yeah, for this, it definitely, I think, for the kind of the theme and tone more in particular of the movie, that the saxophone and those bluesy tones and stuff was definitely.
Well, it's indicative of a very crime noir feel. That they've used over the years in terms of like, classic Los Angeles, classic Hollywood, that sort of thing. Do you ever know what bureau they're out of?
I always know that they're, I mean, obviously they're in Los Angeles, but yeah, no, they never really talk about like what their precinct or whatever is. Okay. They're homicide detectives at the very least, obviously.
Well, like the Hollywood division is very popularized by stuff like Black Dahlia and the things that happened with the not publishing houses, film studios and that.
Well,
sort
there's
of thing.
even a
So,
movie in name that's like, what is it? Hollywood. It's
Hollywood
not
Homicide.
Homicide. Yeah. Okay. So I was
Right.
on the right track, but I feel
But,
like there's another one too. But
like Maine, LA has their primary, and it's just called RHD, which is Robbery Homicide Division. So I was just kind of curious if they were like that, or if they were in one of the separate sub departments that feature around Los Angeles.
It's another thing that I think the movie has going for it, which is, do we want to tack on time to explore the dynamics of their organizational structure? Maybe in 2, 3, and 4, sure, but here we need the time for this relationship, and it's welcome. I am pretty harsh when movies spend too much time on the rigmarole of what sort of day in, day out life is and the organizational structure of police organizations in movies. It's not that I think that audiences are smart enough, we don't need to be told anymore. It's just that sometimes the people that want to focus on it too much. So I thought it was a breath of fresh air to not have that as part of this dynamic at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, really, each scene, each escalation within the case that they're tracking elevates their relationship and their trust and everything. And that's kind of what you're sort of focused on, but is their relationship. But the stuff that happens in between that is sort of just taking that relationship to its next level, basically its next plateau.
Well, you guys ready to give out some superlatives?
Let's do it.
Getting too old for I mean, yes.
All right. So MVP, Dustin.
Danny Glover. And I don't know if we get that chance to give him the MVP when I will say I had no idea how many of his roles I knew and have seen. I mean, it is his best role, but also for his range. We have to give kudos to Mel Gibson for his portrayal of a character that's off his rocker. But Murtaugh as a normal man, family man that gets driven to the antics that he is, wonderful to see on screen. So Danny Glover for me.
Coulter, what's your MVP?
I think it's got to be Mel Gibson. His comedic timing and the way he plays crazy to me, I just love it.
I'll open this up just in case anybody else has it, but I went with MVP and supporting as Gibson and Glover. I feel like this movie is completely led by a partnership. So feel free if anybody else came to that conclusion. I feel like that's what makes the film. So I will do a rare coupling.
Sure.
I would agree. I didn't know what I could get away with. Yeah.
Well, Brian and I are here, so we're going to throw most of the rules out.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Awesome. I love it.
We're probably the loosest.
Bad. Well, when it comes to a movie you love, it's hard to make some of those decisions, like truly. And this is definitely one of them. Like, I mean, even when we're going to get into like things you would change and stuff like that, like, I mean, I had to really sit on some of that stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, you're with these two characters. So, I mean, and their dynamic is just, I mean, it's fun to watch.
I'm going to go a little out of order here because I am very curious on what everyone's going to say for this. Change one thing, Coulter.
Oh, change one thing. So this is the one that was tough for me, but then I finally came to it. So I would have liked to have seen Murtaugh actually kill the general, like physically get his paws on him and choke him or shoot him or do, whatever to him.
Sure. Dustin, change one.
I already mentioned I love the pace of this movie. I could have done with Murtaugh and Riggs being opposite odd couple cops for a little bit longer. And as part of that, I think I would have preferred to have the Riggs Death Wish suicide information manifest to us as the audience in something that we observe through actions, rather than being told to us by the police doctor. If it needs to come from the police doctor, maybe this is something that Murtaugh picks up later, like a file that shows that like there's a big red rubber stamp, it's like suicidal, like recommend for dismissal, something like that, instead of us being led there by the doctor. But there are many movies where we are asked to change one thing, and most of the time I pick something that's like, oh, this has to be changed. I probably wouldn't like push for this hard, but I think it would improve. I think it would improve this one.
So for me, I know part of the driving force of this of this film is ageism. And I kind of touched on it earlier with, young guy, older gentleman, I'm too old for this. Like, it is a thing that they touch upon almost like a slinky going down the stairs throughout this entire film. But when there are opportunities for it to not be so blatant, I feel like they didn't take them. So, for instance, when you have the torture scene at the end and Glover is being beaten while being questioned by the general, the old guy and the old guy. Meanwhile, Mel Gibson's being tortured by the dude with the electro, and then Gary Busey,
And
the young guy. And that's how they end up being matched up for the kill. That's how, that's the end fight scene. And I was just like, all right, that's just maybe a bit too on the nose. Like, you don't have to, it's like if it was a male-female partner and the female and the bad female fight it out and the bad male and the bad male fight it out. It's like, I get why you do it, but maybe just a bit too much harping on that one thing. Maybe you don't have to press the button every opportunity you get.
Well, it's very specific types of torture that they chose for the two, right?
Sure.
Where Glover's just getting, they're just basically laying the mitts to him, and then Riggs is basically chained up and he's getting electroshock, and
right.
whatever. So it's kind of, but I guess they looked at it as like, maybe it'd be because of given Riggs and his training, and they kind of know a little bit about him, I think, at that point. So they wanted to give him something a little bit more intense, so to speak.
Yeah. Speaking of intensity, part of the thing with Murtaugh is that they have his daughter, and they bring the daughter into the room.
Oh, totally.
And they could have chosen to go way more hardcore with this. Yeah. I believe the note that he finds in his house says, "Your daughter looks real pretty naked."
Oh my God.
That could have gone way further. Smart decision not to.
Right.
Sure.
I typically call out whenever being a little more reserved was the right choice, and I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, you can take stuff too far. Like, because even, and it's not like I'm super squeamish as like a moviegoer or anything like that. But sometimes even I'm like, whoa, like that was a little like you could have done. Like, we get it.
Have you guys ever seen the Matt Damon interview where he's talking about Jack Nicholson's additions to his character in The Departed?
I knew that's what you were going with.
And if you keep the camera rolling, and he just keeps adding to it. Dustin, if you haven't seen this, it's amazing. And
I love that story.
Even Damon's kind of portrayal of it, he's not really doing an impression per se, but you can kind of tell that he's trying to emulate the Jack Nicholson vibe a little bit as he's telling it. It's a great story.
I just rewatched that actually not so long ago on Instagram because it'll pop up in my suggested feeds.
Sure,
I love it. Yeah, but I mean it's in the movie. I mean, not to that quite extent,
to the degree that he suggests.
But it's pretty much all there. Like the whole they felt funny. That whole thing is like so good.
Jesus,
he's like, Francis, you really got to see somebody. That whole thing is so good. And that scene is so awesome, and it's like an ugly thing. And Damon points out things that Jack Nicholson's talking about when he's telling the story of like stuff that you didn't really think about of the whole, because he says they fell funny. You can tell that his character has done this before. He's killed a lot of people. And so people fall a certain way when they get shot, when they're executed. And he's just pointing out this one little weird thing that happened in this. In this instance.
So let's go with the hidden gem, Dustin.
Both of these guys are so different from one another. And that's the point, right? But they both drink Coors Banquet beer. Just to show you how we're all not so different from one another, are we?
Yeah, it was a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what movie it was where they had the line, cops don't drive Cadillacs and they don't vote Democrat. And when you bring that up, where they were both drinking Coors Banquet, I just wonder what unwritten rules there are for police departments where it's like, oh, we all drink this, we all don't do this, and we all don't do this.
Well, I'm sure you've got a lot of cops not drinking Bud Light right now.
Well,
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I wonder if it was like a product of its time, where maybe Coors was like kind of the it beer. Even like I was kind of surprised for a place like Los Angeles. I don't know if they'd be like drinking Stella Artois or something. I don't know, like not to try and dog on folks from but I don't know. I mean, I've seen little statistic things like online of like beers that are popular within certain regions of the United States or certain states, like state by state,
Sure.
of like stuff that they drink.
Absolutely.
You know who loves PBR more than boys in the South?
Boys in Montana, probably.
They got that Montucky cold snack.
Yeah.
The Japanese love PBR.
Do they really?
Really?
Yeah, it's one of those like fascinations with something across the world.
It's Rainier country in my neck of the woods.
I love a Rainier. I'm
I
2.5
just
years
had one.
sober, but I love a Rainier.
I just had a Rainier last night, and I haven't had one in ages. And that was my. We refer to it around here as piss beer because it flows like water, and you just have to go to the bathroom pretty much the whole time you drink. Just goes right through you. But yeah, I hadn't had a Rainier in a long time, and actually, it's kind of funny. Like, Dustin, when you drank it, like, did you drink it during the time I don't know if they did it last year, but around Christmas time, they have the Jubilee cans. They're like a specific Christmas can that they do every Christmas.
I remember the big stylized R. I had it. I had it in Cle Elum. I had it up in Washington. I went to a little Redbird Cafe for brunch, and I did not want whatever like mimosas or something they were serving. I'm like, I'll have a Rainier.
Yes,
I think I had 3 in an hour.
Or they call it sometimes, like my friends from Washington, they call it Ronier.
Ronier, yeah.
Ronier.
Oh, that's
I'll
great.
have a Ronier.
See, down here we've got Lone Star is our cheap beer.
Oh, sure.
But me and all my friends call them Lonesters.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, beer's not really cheap anymore. For sure. It doesn't even matter if it is the cheaper end. So, but yeah.
Well, we're gonna.
That my hidden gem is that they both drink Coors.
Yes.
Okay, Coulter, hidden gem, bud.
I don't know if it's hidden so much, but if you're really paying attention, Riggs's crazy eyes, like when it closes in on his face, or like when he's getting ready to he's basically gonna essentially Hulk out or Riggs out on bad guys, like his eyes.
Oh, I love that. Riggs out.
Yeah. So like I always kind of I was really kind of noticing that more this watch, because he just especially like, and it's across almost the entire movie too, like when he's so like I think the best example of it is when Murtaugh hands him his gun. He's like, go ahead, put the barrel in your mouth and all this stuff, and the hammer's just clicking back and it's about ready to go, and he's like, oh my god, and he takes it from him, but it closes in on Riggs's eyes, and like he's like really thinking about it. He's really ready to like blow his head off in that lobby.
Right. I went with Sam the dog. I felt like there just needed to be a little bit of justice for Sam the dog in this movie. I love Sam. Sam reprises his role of Sam in number
every
2 as well.
Movie. Every single one.
And man, Sam the dog. I'm gonna dig the knife a little bit deeper here. We're gonna recast one person, and Dustin, who you're recasting?
The General. Mitchell Ryan doesn't do it for me, I'm sorry to say. Give me, and I know the timing doesn't work out quite right, but give me Ed Harris, like in The Rock.
Oh, okay.
Or my other option would be Ron Perlman. Now, both of these guys, strangely enough, both Ed Harris and Ron Perlman were born in 1950, so they would have been 35 or 36 at the time of filming. That's not old enough for the type of character the General was written to be. But just have him be some other special forces or whatever. That whole, whatever the military is or was supposed to be, is, like we've said, it's so boilerplate now anyway. Like, doesn't really matter if this guy was like in command or not. So I think that was a space that there could have been more star power.
Age-wise, it could have been forgiven.
I don't disagree with that. I will say that one of the things that always clicks into my head when you get into these 80s crime films is you always have like the guy who plays the chief. It's like that's additional, B actor chief guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing with the general, additional generic chief person. What would happen a decade later with the Brian Coxes of the world, where it's like, he's the chief in Super Troopers. It's like, they fit that part. And there's actually a Patton Oswalt stand-up where he meets, I don't remember if it was Brian Cox or Brian Dennehy. It was Brian Dennehy. He meets Dennehy, and he's talking about being at this premiere. I think it was for like Batman Begins or something. And he's at the big spread they've got, and he's just stuffing his face. And Dennehy walks by and he goes, "Character actors, who cares if we're fat?" And just keeps walking. And I was just like, exactly. Like it doesn't
awesome.
matter.
That's awesome.
So anyway, that's just whenever I see like that guy, I think of that quote that Patton brings up about Brian Dennehy. Yeah, I feel
Dennehy's in First Blood, right?
Yes, he's the chief, the police chief in Rambo: First Blood. Yeah. So Coulter, recap.
Dustin, totally almost thought of Ed Harris for the general, because mine is general as well.
Yeah.
But then I did think about age a little bit, but then I totally botched that with my pick. I thought of, because it was really hard, because I actually liked the cast. I thought the guy they cast as the general, what was his name again?
Mitchell Ryan.
Right, Mitchell Ryan. He totally worked for me, but I mean, he really doesn't have a lot of screen time. I mean, he's kind of running the show, but
fairly inconsequential.
He's far less menacing than Scary Busey,
Right.
So I went with Kiefer Sutherland as the general. I thought he could kind of work because he can be more of a, like, he has that raspy voice and he can look super scary and stuff. So it would have been kind of a nice pairing with him and Gary Busey, even though Gary Busey would have been older.
I think it's fair to say right now, Kiefer Sutherland plugging him in back then, I think that's a fair thing to say. I don't have any problem.
Remember how
we mess with age all the time. He would have been 20.
Well, when I think of him as a bad guy, I think of him as just the voice in Phone Booth.
Phone Booth. We got to do Phone Booth.
Phone Booth was good. Yeah. But also, like, he does the voice of Punish Snake in Metal Gear Solid 5. So he plays like a general. He plays Big Boss. And so there's that whole like aspect. Granted, he's actually 50. He's in his 50s when he did that role, which is what they were kind of looking for. But yeah, I thought, like, because he can look scary and menacing, and he's got that like kind of unique, distinct voice.
The voice. So I'm gonna go with I'm recasting Len McCleary. Len McCleary plays the Jumper in this.
Oh, okay.
And instead of having him, I think this is the perfect spot for a notable cameo.
Okay.
And I wish the Jumper had been Dennis Miller.
Oh, okay.
I think if Dennis Miller he was up there, Riggs goes out, Dennis Miller does a very Dennis Miller rant, and then
What's
they
up,
jump.
Scooby? I'm gonna jump off the building here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think that would have been the perfect.
Offers me a cigarette, babe.
Yeah.
Can I get
I just think that would be the perfect spot. Perfect spot for a notable cameo.
Yeah.
Although I will say all right. So next up is going to be best shot. We'll shoot to Coulter this time.
That desert scene, I'd kind of mentioned it way back. I that scene's pretty cool. Like, and everything's kind of happened at night, and they go like, I think they're like supposedly the time it takes place is supposed to be like the wee hours of the morning with sunrise and stuff. But yeah, that shot's really cool, like with the helicopters and everything, and the dust blowing around, and it's that standoff.
Illustrates the diversity of LA County. Dustin, what do you got? Best shot.
There's many to choose from, and you've seen a movie enough times. I want to give credit to that opening jumper shot of the woman Amanda jumping off, because it's shot well, and you see a lot of jumper scenes, and that one's so good. But there's also something really artistic about the guy that falls dead into the pool with the plastic on it. Mm-hmm. It's something you just never see. And I thought they really focus on their faces, like trying to get through the plastic. It becomes an obstacle to them saving them. But I just thought like it's also the first part of the movie where they are really in danger from firearms. And I'm like, this is kind of a cool. I don't know. It stuck with me this time. I probably would choose a different best shot every time I see it.
Yeah, I would agree. It was hard for me to pick.
Best shot. I don't know if you guys remember or are familiar with the 1991 show called Silk Stockings. It was a late night, I want to say USA
yeah.
show, and it had a very, it was basically revolved around sexy crimes. And I just felt like the entire intro to this movie reminded me so heavy of that show. So it's really that Silk Stockings, high dive off the building. You guys know how much of a crime noir fan I am. I just felt like all of that really just fed into that. Let's go with.
Did you like La Femme Nikita?
Oh, dude, loved it. In fact,
we'll have to talk about it later.
Female spy shows sign me up 100% of the time. Best scene, Coulter.
Gosh, I really love when Riggs is introduced to Murtaugh and he like flips. He's like, gun, and they're looking around. He flips him, and then it does that nice thing, and he does this little thing with his hat, like he kind of cocks back or secures his ball cap a little more.
Sure,
and he's got the gun on him. I always kind of love that. It was super cool.
Absolutely. Best scene, Dustin.
It's all a credit to Glover's acting when he's screaming at Murtaugh after he jumps off the building with the other jumper. Starts with him nearly ripping that door off. A late career Glover is milquetoast.
Yes.
I take his role in Wahlberg's Shooter, and it's just flat. And so this is the Danny Glover that like needs to be remembered in film history, and that power is awesome.
The screaming is so good in that.
And he's got long arms, and he's still really fit, and so like he looks as if like if there's anybody capable of like beating Riggs in a slobber knocker, it might be a pissed off Murtaugh.
Oh, he's almost getting screamed at like Murtaugh is a drunk little league dad or a football coach or something, and they just totally botched.
Thought this was America.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me on this, I love the shooting range scene.
Oh yeah.
I just the just illustrating. They go from this piece where it's like, okay, I don't want to work with you, and I'm screwed, and that's why I'm here, and yada yada yada, to a camaraderie based, like, let's see who's a better shot kind of thing. And I felt like it's really the only scene you get of a competitive nature between the two of them, which is part of that partner building aspect. So I just really appreciated that the shooting range scene.
They're also working out the case, which is cool.
Right.
They're talking it through.
All right, let's do best quote. Dustin.
Coulter mentioned it. Tell you what, you make it through tomorrow without killing anybody, especially me or yourself, then I'll start trusting you.
Roger that. And Coulter.
6-shooter, huh? A lot of old timers carry those.
Right.
They're talking about what they got. That's a serious piece of hardware you're carrying there. But just the fact that he says 6-shooter, but it's totally that ageist thing. It's going back to that ageist thing, which I waited till now to kind of touch on the point of that. It's just another layer to that.
Absolutely.
It is kind of funny that he says 6-shooter and not like revolver, like a service revolver. He says 6-shooter as if like, oh, you're so old, this is Western.
Yeah, it's called a 6-shooter. Yeah.
I did have a backup best quote since you had mentioned mine before, which is back and forth. Murtaugh says, "God hates me. That's what it is," and Riggs says, "Hate him back."
Yeah,
works for me.
Oh, I know. I love that line. I love that one when I was watching it the other night.
I had to settle in and really like it's the crown quote of the movie, and I'm just dying to find out what Dustin uses to cover this up, but I'm too old for this. All right, guys. Well, that about wraps it up. Let's give this movie a rating. It's going to be on a 5-star scale. You can use decimal places, although I prefer not to. Dustin, on a 5-star scale, what you got, bro?
I'm giving this a generous score of 4.5 stars. I think the movie is archetypical in the best way. It's a paragon of the buddy cop movie. There are a few things that we have talked about, mainly the reliance on boilerplate of the times stuff. Having 2 jump by suicide scenes in one movie is odd. There's so many things to choose from that to have repetition there. And I think we've already done a good enough job mentioning the things that we kind of noticed this time. Otherwise, as just a pure example of what this movie, of what this genre should be, I think it's earned all 4.5.
Coulter, rating.
Sorry, but 5 out of 5. I mean, for me, it's nostalgia and my love of the buddy cop genre. Again, I've lived with this movie and the others in its franchise for decades now, so it's it's hard for me not to give it all the love. I mean, I tried not to ruin it at the beginning, but yeah, I mean, that's why one of the reasons. I mean, all the movies that I picked were ones I would have gushed over, obviously.
Well, I gave this a not to be disrespectful 4 stars. I think this is as good as you can get in most of this action genre. I don't have, I think I would give Die Hard probably the same rating. I'm trying to remember if we had done Die Hard and what rating I gave it, but I try to be. I think this is as good as anything in this genre really gets, I guess is my point. I don't think I hold anything up over this in terms of that action duo comedy, interlaced, that sort of piece. So yeah, 4 stars. Dustin, would you like to help me pick out a movie for next time?
That's right. Now we go from crime in the 80s to love in the 80s. I got 3 options for you, Brian. Let's start with option number 1, Splash from 1984. A young man is reunited with a mermaid who saved him from drowning as a boy. He falls in love with her, not knowing who or what she is. Option number 2, Hannah and Her Sisters from 1986. Between 2 Thanksgivings 2 years apart, Hannah's husband falls in love with her sister Lee, while her hypochondriac ex-husband rekindles his relationship with her sister Holly. Or option number 3, Mystic Pizza from 1988. 3 teenage girls come of age while working at a pizza parlor in the Connecticut town of Mystic. What's it going to be?
I'm going to go with Mystic Pizza on this one. All right. Well, listen, thanks again, Coulter, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you. We hope to have you on again.
Thanks so much for having me. I look forward to hopefully coming back, and we'll do it again.
Thank you to all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us because we want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcasts. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's mostly audio only. Give us a like on Facebook, Instagram, and follow us on Twitter at movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Producing and providing for this podcast is fun but not free. We invite you to support the show at our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable/. Any contribution is much appreciated and will go toward making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Dustin?
I could have killed them all. I could have killed you. In town, you're the law. Out here, it's me. Don't push it. Don't push it, or I'll give you a war you wouldn't believe. Let it go. Let it go.